If you are really a general, prove it. Sergeant Eric Caldwell said the words loudly enough for the two officers beside him to hear, and both men looked toward the black woman standing at the east gate of the Arlington Memorial Conference Center. Major General Angela Whitfield did not react to their expressions. She stood beneath the cold morning light in a charcoal suit and pale gold blouse, one hand resting on a sealed brown leather case, the other holding out a military identification card that Caldwell had not scanned. Behind the barrier, a military band was already taking position. 12 families waited inside for a ceremony that could not begin without her. The clock above the security station showed 18 minutes remaining. Angela looked at the scanner on Caldwell's desk. "That is what the machine is for," she said. His smile tightened. He placed her card beside the keyboard without using it. What he did not know was that 4 generals were waiting for Angela's command, and the sealed case at her side contained names that had been kept secret until that morning. Subscribe and stay with this story, because the proof Caldwell demanded was about to arrive in a way he could never explain away. Angela had come in a rented dark blue sedan with her 18-year-old daughter, Sophie, seated beside her. No official driver. No escort vehicle. No medals across her chest. Caldwell had watched them approach and decided what they could not be before either woman reached the desk. "Senior officers do not usually arrive like this," he said. Angela kept her voice level. "Senior officers arrive in many ways. Not for a ceremony of this level." Sophie shifted beside her mother, but Angela gave her a brief look that said wait. She had spent 30 years in rooms where doubt often arrived before her name. Anger would give Caldwell something else to examine. Facts would leave him with nowhere to hide. She pointed to the card. "Scan it." Officer Ryan Cooper stood at the second terminal, watching the exchange. His monitor had already detected the identification chip when Caldwell placed the card near the reader. A green notification appeared along the edge of the screen. Authorized access. General Officer Credential. Cooper leaned closer, but Caldwell reached over and closed the window. "The system is not confirming your identity," he said. Angela's eyes moved from the darkened screen to his face. "The system confirmed it. You dismissed it." Caldwell turned toward the leather case. A narrow tamper-evident seal crossed its brass clasp, and an official transfer label was fixed near the handle. "Open that." Angela's fingers settled over the leather. "Not at this gate. Then it stays outside." Sophie looked at him. "Those are memorial documents." Caldwell barely glanced at her. "Young lady, let the adults handle this." Angela stepped half a pace forward, not threatening, only present. "You will speak to my daughter with respect. You are in no position to give orders here." Angela held his gaze. "Then verify who is." A ceremonial bugle sounded faintly beyond the building. Sophie tightened her hand around the photograph hidden inside her coat, the last picture of her father beside his rescue aircraft. Angela had promised to enter that ceremony as his wife before standing before the families as a general. Caldwell saw only civilian clothes and an ordinary car. He did not see the service record behind her silence. He did not know the final name inside the sealed case belonged to her husband. The radio on his shoulder crackled. "East Gate, confirm arrival of the presiding officer." Caldwell lifted the microphone while staring directly at Angela. "Negative," he replied. "We have a woman here claiming a rank she cannot prove." Cooper looked at the green authorization record still visible in the system history. Sophie inhaled sharply. Angela remained still. Then she placed 2 fingers on the desk beside her unscanned card. "Record the time, Sergeant," she said. "This is the moment you stopped checking the truth and started defending your assumption." The radio went silent, but the accusation remained in the air. Sophie stared at Caldwell as though she had misheard him. Angela did not. She had heard that tone before in briefing rooms, airports, and government buildings where strangers believed confidence belonged to them and proof belonged to her. She looked at the digital clock above the gate. 17 minutes remained. Beyond the glass security doors, uniformed musicians adjusted their instruments while 12 military families waited beside framed photographs and folded flags. Angela rested her hand on the brown leather case. "Return my identification," she said. Caldwell slid the card farther from her. It stays here until I determine whether it is legitimate. Officer Cooper turned back to his monitor. The system history still displayed the result Caldwell had closed: Major General Angela Whitfield. Authorized. Presiding officer. Cooper read it twice, then looked toward his supervisor. Sergeant, her record cleared. Caldwell did not face him. The system can produce incomplete matches. This is a full match. Then run it again. Cooper inserted the card number manually. The screen refreshed. The same green banner appeared, followed by Angela's official photograph, rank, access level, and ceremonial assignment. Sophie saw the glow reflected in Cooper's face. There, she said. You have proof. Caldwell turned toward her. I told you to stay out of this. Angela moved slightly between them. Her posture remained relaxed, but the boundary was unmistakable. My daughter asked you to acknowledge the evidence in front of you. Your daughter is interfering with a security review. She is standing quietly beside her mother. Caldwell picked up the sealed leather case by its handle. Angela's hand closed over the opposite side before he could move it. Neither pulled. Release the case, he said. It contains protected memorial records. Which is why it requires inspection. The chain of custody order authorizes opening only before the presiding officer and 4 designated generals. Caldwell gave a short laugh. And I suppose you are the presiding officer. Angela looked at him without blinking. You already read the answer. Cooper printed the verification report. The paper emerged with a soft mechanical sound that seemed unusually loud in the checkpoint. He placed it on the desk. Caldwell's eyes moved over the words, then away. Angela felt Sophie's fingers brush her sleeve. The girl was trying to remain composed, but her breathing had changed. Inside the case lay 12 sealed citations, 12 names, and a private letter written by Colonel Michael Whitfield before his final rescue mission. Angela had promised Sophie that when her father's name was read, they would stand together as family. She had chosen civilian clothes for that reason. The charcoal suit belonged to a widow. The pale gold blouse had been Michael's favorite. Her uniform waited inside the conference center for the official portion of the ceremony. Caldwell saw none of that. He saw an ordinary black woman arriving in a rented sedan and decided the official record must be mistaken. Why did you come without an escort? He asked. Because I chose to. Senior leadership does not move without coordination. My arrival was coordinated. Angela pointed to the printed order beneath his hand. Colonel Rebecca Shaw confirmed it yesterday. Caldwell reached for his radio. We will contact her. You should have done that before accusing me. He ignored the remark and called the ceremony office. Static answered first. Then a hurried voice said Colonel Shaw was already on the main floor preparing the families. Caldwell requested confirmation of Angela's identity, but the signal broke apart before the response came through. He lowered the radio with visible satisfaction. Until I receive direct confirmation, you remain outside. Cooper looked at the green screen, the printed record, and the official seal. Sergeant, we already have direct confirmation. Caldwell's jaw tightened. Officer Cooper, step away from the terminal. Cooper did not move. Angela watched the younger officer confront the choice forming in front of him. Silence would be easier. Silence would also help Caldwell turn verified facts into suspicion. From beyond the gate came the first measured notes of the military band. Sophie looked toward the conference center. Mom, they are starting. Angela checked the clock. 14 minutes remained. Then the radio on Caldwell's shoulder crackled again, this time with a clear command voice. East Gate, this is General Morrison. Major General Whitfield was validated on the access roster. Bring her through immediately. Caldwell stared at the radio. Angela waited. He had demanded proof. Now proof was speaking directly to him. Caldwell kept the radio near his mouth, but no answer came. General Morrison's command had been clear. The access system had been clear. The printed record on the desk was clear. Yet Caldwell looked at Angela as though certainty itself had become suspicious. General Morrison may be referring to another officer, he said. Cooper stared at him. The roster lists only one Major General Whitfield. Sophie's expression changed from disbelief to something colder. She had watched her mother remain patient while every piece of evidence was questioned, and now even a direct command was being treated as insufficient. Angela noticed her daughter's hands tightening around the photograph inside her coat. "Sophie," she said softly. "Stay with me." Caldwell set the radio down. "The sealed case still requires review." Angela looked at the tamper evidence strip crossing the brass clasp. "You have the transfer order." "I have paperwork." "Signed by the base commander." "Paperwork can be wrong." Cooper stepped closer to the desk. "Sergeant, the instructions specifically say the case is not to be opened at the gate." Caldwell turned on him. "You are not running this checkpoint." "No, sir. But I am responsible for reporting what the system shows." The words were quiet, but they changed the air between them. Angela watched Cooper glance at the body camera on his uniform. He understood that the decision was no longer private. Caldwell understood it too. He moved the printed verification sheet beneath another folder, then lifted his radio again. "Eastgate requesting additional security for a credential dispute." Sophie took one step forward. "There is no dispute. You just do not like the answer." Caldwell's face tightened. "Young lady, step back." Angela moved between them before the command could become anything more. "Do not use my daughter's grief to justify your behavior. I am protecting a military event." From a verified presiding officer carrying an authorized case. He said nothing. Through the glass doors, the conference center's main corridor glowed with soft gold light. Staff members crossed quickly between the ceremony hall and the reception area. Somewhere inside, 12 families were waiting to hear the names of people they had lost. Angela knew each file inside the case. She had read every service record after midnight, every citation, every final letter released by the families. Michael's name was last. She had chosen that order herself because she wanted to serve the others before facing her own grief. Caldwell saw only the case. He did not see the weight of 12 unfinished lives inside it. "Why are you refusing to open it?" he asked. Angela's voice remained steady. "Because dignity does not become suspicious simply because you cannot control it." Cooper reopened the authorization window and turned the monitor fully toward the checkpoint. The screen displayed Angela's photograph, active status, Major General rank, presiding officer designation, and unrestricted ceremonial entry. Beneath it, a system note confirmed the sealed case and identified the 4 witnessing generals. Caldwell read every line. His eyes stopped at the names. David Morrison. Helen Brooks. Luis Ramirez. Isaiah Grant. Sophie watched his confidence falter. "You knew," she said. "You saw all of this before." Caldwell reached toward the keyboard, but Cooper placed his hand beside it. "The log is already saved." For the first time, Caldwell looked uncertain about which order he could give without making the truth worse. The clock changed again. 11 minutes remained. A ceremonial announcement echoed faintly from the hall, asking the families to take their seats. Angela felt Sophie's shoulder touch hers. The contact carried more fear than Sophie would admit. Angela opened the inner pocket of her leather case without breaking the seal and removed a small photograph. Michael stood beside a rescue aircraft, smiling into bright desert sunlight. On the back, in his handwriting, were the words he had sent home before his final mission: "Rank is temporary. The way we treat people remains." Angela handed the photograph to Sophie. The girl read the line, then drew a slow breath. Cooper saw it from across the desk. So did Caldwell. Before anyone spoke, the glass doors opened. Colonel Rebecca Shaw hurried toward the checkpoint, followed by 4 figures in full dress uniforms. Their pace was controlled, but urgent. Caldwell straightened and reached for his cap, ready to explain the security concern he believed he had managed. Angela placed the photograph back in Sophie's hand and rested her palm on the sealed case. The 4 generals entered the gate area together. Morrison looked past Caldwell. Brooks stopped beside him. Ramirez and Grant followed. Then all 4 saw Angela. Their steps halted at the same instant. Caldwell began, "Generals, I can explain." No one looked at him. 4 sets of heels came together. 4 right hands rose in perfect silence. Sophie stared at her mother as every officer at the checkpoint froze. General Morrison held the salute and said, "Major General Whitfield, 12 families are waiting for your command." Angela returned the salute with measured precision, then lowered her hand. The checkpoint remained silent. Even the distant music seemed to pause beneath the weight of what had just happened. General Morrison stepped closer, his eyes moving from Angela to the printed verification record half hidden beneath Caldwell's folder. "Why was the presiding officer still outside after direct confirmation?" he asked. Caldwell straightened. There were unresolved security concerns regarding her arrival and the sealed case. General Helen Brooks looked at the tamper evidence strip across the leather clasp. "That case is listed in the ceremonial transfer order." Officer Cooper lifted the printed report. "Her identity and access were confirmed at 8:46, General." Morrison took the page and read it. Sophie watched Caldwell's face as the certainty drained from it. He had expected rank to arrive wearing a uniform, surrounded by staff, announced by flashing lights. Instead, it had stood quietly in front of him while he ignored every fact that contradicted his assumption. "The system can make errors," Caldwell said. General Luis Ramirez glanced toward the monitor. "Did it make an error?" Cooper answered. "No, sir." General Isaiah Grant stepped beside Angela, his expression controlled but firm. "Did General Whitfield provide official orders?" "Yes," Cooper said. "Did she request that you contact ceremony staff?" "Yes, sir." "Did you report her as a possible impersonator after seeing the authorization?" Cooper hesitated only a moment. "Yes, sir." Sergeant Caldwell made that report. Caldwell turned toward him. "Officer, be careful." Angela's gaze sharpened. "He is being careful. He is protecting the record." Morrison folded the verification page and handed it to Colonel Rebecca Shaw, who had arrived behind the generals. "Preserve the access logs, radio traffic, and body camera footage. Contact the installation security supervisor." Caldwell looked toward Angela. "General, I apologize for the misunderstanding." Angela did not answer immediately. She felt Sophie standing close beside her, the photograph of Michael still held between her fingers. 12 families were waiting inside. The ceremony clock showed 9 minutes. She could have accepted the apology, walked through the gate, and allowed the moment to disappear beneath military formality. But silence would teach the wrong lesson. "What exactly are you apologizing for?" she asked. Caldwell swallowed. "For not recognizing your rank." Angela shook her head. "That is not the failure." The officers around the desk remained motionless. "You saw a black woman arrive without an escort, and you decided the official record had to be wrong. You dismissed the scanner, the orders, the radio command, and your own officer because none of them supported the story you had already chosen." Caldwell lowered his eyes. Angela continued, her voice calm enough that every word carried. "The person you judged deserved respect before anyone saluted her." Sophie looked at her mother, pride replacing the fear that had been building since they arrived. Morrison nodded toward the glass doors. "General Whitfield, we need to begin." Angela turned to Cooper. "Officer, did you save the original verification time?" "Yes, General." "And the system history?" "Yes." "Then keep it intact. No edits. No rewritten summary." Cooper nodded. "Understood." Colonel Shaw took temporary control of the checkpoint while the installation security supervisor was summoned. Caldwell was instructed to step away from the desk and surrender the gate radio for administrative review. He removed it slowly and placed it beside Angela's identification card. The small click of plastic against the counter sounded final. Angela picked up her card, then lifted the sealed leather case. Sophie reached for the other handle. Together, they carried it toward the entrance. The 4 generals formed behind them, not to display power, but to honor the duty Angela had come to perform. As the glass doors opened, warm light moved across Sophie's face. She looked back once at Caldwell, then at the green authorization screen still glowing behind him. "He had the answer the whole time," she whispered. Angela looked ahead toward the waiting families. "Yes," she said. But truth only matters when someone has the courage to follow it. The conference hall doors opened onto rows of 12 waiting families, each seated beside a framed photograph, a folded flag, and an empty chair representing someone who would never return. Angela entered with Sophie carrying one side of the sealed leather case. The four generals followed several paces behind, but Angela did not move toward the raised platform. She guided her daughter to the front row, where a photograph of Colonel Michael Whitfield rested beneath a small brass lamp. Sophie stopped. Her father was smiling beside a rescue aircraft, one hand raised against the sunlight. The same photograph was still trembling between her fingers. "You can take a moment," Angela whispered. Sophie looked toward the waiting families. "They have been waiting too." Angela felt the answer settle deep inside her. 12 names. 12 homes changed forever. 12 stories that deserved more than a delayed ceremony and a polished speech. She placed the leather case on the presentation table while Colonel Rebecca Shaw checked the unbroken seal and signed the final chain of custody form. General Morrison leaned close. "The installation security supervisor has taken control of the gate. Every recording is being preserved." Angela nodded. "Make sure Officer Cooper's statement is protected." "It will be." Across the building, Caldwell stood inside a small administrative office without his radio or access credentials. His supervising captain reviewed the system log on a secure monitor. The first entry showed Angela's identification detected at 8:46. The second showed full authorization. The third showed Caldwell closing the verification screen. 2 minutes later, the radio record captured him reporting a possible impersonator. "Did you see her status?" the captain asked. Caldwell looked toward the blank wall. "I saw the result." "Then why did you call it unconfirmed?" He searched for the language that had always protected him before: caution, protocol, unusual circumstances. None of it could erase the green authorization record. "She did not arrive the way I expected," he said. The captain studied him. "You treated your expectation as evidence." Caldwell said nothing. In the hall, the military band finished its opening piece. Angela stood behind the lectern as the light softened over the audience. She was still wearing the charcoal suit and pale gold blouse. Her uniform waited in a private room nearby, but she had chosen not to change. Today, before every title, she was Michael's wife and Sophie's mother. She looked across the 12 families and began without mentioning the delay. Each name in this case belongs to a person whose final act placed someone else's life before their own. Sophie sat in the front row holding the photograph against her chest. Angela released the ceremonial seal. The brass clasp opened with a quiet click. Inside were 12 citation folders arranged over dark blue fabric. Beneath the final folder lay Michael's last letter. Angela's fingers paused above it, then moved to the first name. She read slowly, giving every word enough space to be heard. A rescue medic who had remained with an injured crew. A communications officer who had restored contact during a storm. A pilot who had returned for civilians after being ordered to evacuate. One by one, family members stepped forward. Angela placed each citation into waiting hands, meeting every person's eyes before letting go. No rank could make that exchange easier. No ceremony could contain the years behind their grief. When the 11th family returned to their seat, the hall became completely still. Only Michael's folder remained. Sophie rose before her name was called and walked toward the platform. Angela looked down at the final citation, then at her daughter. For the first time that morning, discipline did not hide the pain in her face. "Colonel Michael James Whitfield," she said, and her voice nearly broke on the middle name. Sophie reached the stage. Angela opened the folder and removed the posthumous medal, but before presenting it, she unfolded Michael's letter. The final line was written in the same steady hand Sophie knew from childhood birthday cards: "Rank is temporary. The way we treat people remains." Angela looked toward her daughter, then toward the families. "He wrote this before his final mission," she said. "This morning reminded me why he believed it." Outside the hall, the green light at the east gate remained glowing on the saved verification record. Inside, Sophie accepted her father's medal with both hands, and Angela understood that the real measure of what happened would not be whether Caldwell felt ashamed. It would be whether the next person standing at that gate was believed before anyone powerful arrived to salute them. The hall remained silent after Sophie accepted the medal. Angela folded Michael's letter and placed it beside the final citation, but she did not leave the lectern. The 12 families were still standing, and the 4 generals remained behind her beneath the service flags. She looked at each empty chair before speaking again. "Honor cannot live only in rooms like this," she said. "It must follow us to checkpoints, offices, sidewalks, and every place where one person has the power to decide how another will be treated." Sophie held her father's medal against her palm. The medal felt cool and heavier than she expected. She remembered the way Caldwell had looked at her mother, not as a general, not even as a widow carrying protected records, but as someone whose truth could be postponed until a more important person confirmed it. Angela stepped away from the microphone and joined her daughter at the front of the stage. "Your father believed rules should protect people," she said quietly. "He also knew people can use rules to hide from responsibility." Sophie looked toward the closed doors at the back of the hall. "Will they investigate him?" "They will investigate the decision, the record, and whether it happened before." In the administrative office, Caldwell sat across from his supervising captain while Officer Cooper's saved system log filled the monitor. The captain reviewed every entry in order. Angela's credential had cleared. Her ceremonial assignment had appeared. General Morrison had confirmed her identity. Caldwell had ignored all 3. This was not a failure of technology, the captain said. It was a failure of judgment. Caldwell stared at the time stamps. "I thought additional caution was necessary." "Would you have applied the same caution to a white man arriving in civilian clothes with identical authorization?" The question remained unanswered longer than any technical inquiry. Caldwell finally looked down. "I do not know." The captain closed the file. "Then that is part of the problem." She placed him on administrative leave pending a formal review and ordered an audit of his previous gate decisions. At the ceremony, General Morrison approached Angela after the families had begun leaving. "The security office found 5 earlier complaints connected to Caldwell," he said. "All involved valid credentials being challenged after confirmation." Angela's expression tightened. "Who filed them?" 2 black veterans, a civilian defense contractor, an Army nurse, and the mother of a graduating officer. "Were the complaints reviewed?" "They were closed as procedural misunderstandings." Angela looked toward the families still gathering around the memorial photographs. "Reopen them." Morrison nodded. "Already ordered." Officer Cooper entered the hall a few minutes later, no longer assigned to the gate but still wearing his body camera. He stopped several feet from Angela. "General, I should have spoken sooner." Angela studied him. Shame had lowered his voice, but it had not erased the fact that he eventually preserved the truth. "Why did you stay silent?" she asked. "He was my supervisor. I thought following the chain of command was safer." "For whom?" Cooper looked toward Sophie. "For me." Angela nodded once. "Then remember what silence cost everyone else." He accepted the words without defending himself. "I saved the original logs, radio recording, and camera footage." "Good. Give them to the review team exactly as they are." "Yes, General." Sophie watched him leave, then turned to her mother. "Do people change after something like this?" Angela looked at Michael's photograph beneath the brass lamp. "Being exposed is not the same as changing." "Then how do you know?" "You watch what they do when the attention is gone." Outside, the wind moved across the east gate and lifted the edge of the printed verification report still resting on the security desk. The green authorization light had disappeared from the monitor, but the record remained saved. Angela placed Michael's letter back inside the leather case and closed the clasp. The ceremony was over. The harder work was beginning. 3 weeks later, the formal review convened in a secure conference room overlooking the same east gate. Angela arrived in civilian clothes, again wearing the pale gold blouse Michael had loved, with Sophie seated beside her and the sealed leather case resting on the floor near their chairs. Across the table sat Caldwell, his supervising captain, 2 civilian oversight officials, General Morrison, and Officer Cooper. No one spoke until the lead investigator activated the recorder and stated the time. "Sergeant Caldwell, did Major General Whitfield present valid military identification?" Caldwell looked at the printed log in front of him. Yes. Did the access system confirm her identity and ceremonial assignment? Yes. Did General Morrison verify her status by radio? Caldwell's jaw tightened. Yes. The investigator folded her hands. Then why did you continue to report her as unconfirmed? The room became still. Caldwell had prepared language about caution, event security, and unusual circumstances, but every phrase sounded weaker beneath the weight of the saved record. She did not arrive the way I expected a senior officer to arrive, he said. Sophie's eyes moved to her mother. Angela remained motionless. The investigator continued. What did you expect? Official transportation. Staff. A uniform. And when the evidence contradicted your expectation? Caldwell looked down. I believe the evidence might be incomplete. Cooper shifted in his chair. He had seen the same screen, the same green authorization, and the same official designation. He knew now that the system had never failed. The failure had happened in the space between what Caldwell saw and what he was willing to accept. The review moved to the 5 earlier complaints. Each file described a black visitor whose valid credentials had been questioned after the system confirmed entry. A retired Army nurse had missed the opening of a reunion ceremony. A defense contractor had been held until his white supervisor arrived. A veteran had been redirected to a service entrance despite an authorized invitation. The language in Caldwell's reports repeated itself: inconsistent presentation, unusual demeanor, additional verification required. None of the visitors had violated a rule. None had been found using false credentials. Were you aware that every person in these complaints was black? The investigator asked. Caldwell's face tightened. I did not consider race. Angela spoke for the first time. Not considering race does not erase a pattern shaped by it. Caldwell looked toward her. General, I never intended to disrespect you. Intent does not revise the result. Her voice remained calm. You saw my rank. You heard the confirmation. You watched your officer produce the record. Then you chose the version of me that protected your first assumption. Caldwell's shoulders lowered slightly. I was wrong. Angela held his gaze. About my rank. He hesitated. About what I believed I was seeing. Say it clearly. The room waited. Caldwell took a slow breath. I treated a black woman as less credible than the records proving who she was. No one rushed to soften the admission. The investigator entered it into the official record. Cooper was questioned next. He admitted that he had seen the authorization and remained silent for several minutes. Why? One oversight official asked. Because Caldwell was my supervisor, and I thought challenging him would damage my career. What changed? Cooper looked at Sophie, then Angela. I realized silence was helping him replace the truth. Angela nodded once. Then remember that before the next person needs your courage. The review board announced that Caldwell would remain on administrative leave while disciplinary proceedings continued, that all 5 complaints would be reopened, and that access decisions involving overridden credentials would receive independent audits. Angela listened, then leaned forward. Add protected reporting for junior officers. Require a second review before valid credentials are rejected. Preserve every override automatically. General Morrison agreed. We will implement all 3. Sophie looked toward the window. Beyond the glass, the east gate barrier lifted for another vehicle, then lowered again. The motion seemed ordinary, almost mechanical. But she understood now that every ordinary decision could reveal who was trusted, who was doubted, and whose dignity was treated as optional. As the meeting ended, Caldwell stood. General Whitfield, he said, I am sorry. Angela rose slowly. Your apology does not begin with me. He looked confused. It begins with the 5 people whose complaints you helped dismiss. Tell them the truth without explaining yourself away. Caldwell nodded. Angela picked up Michael's leather case, and Sophie opened the conference room door. Before leaving, Angela looked back at the saved access log glowing on the investigator's screen. The truth had been present from the beginning. What changed was that people finally stopped asking it to prove itself twice. 2 months later, the reopened complaints brought 5 people into the same conference center where Angela had once been stopped. The retired Army nurse arrived first, wearing a navy coat and carrying a folder thick with unanswered letters. The defense contractor came next, followed by the veteran, the mother of the graduating officer, and a civilian analyst who had nearly lost a clearance interview after Caldwell labeled his behavior evasive. Angela sat with Sophie near the back of the room. She had not asked to lead the hearing. This time, the people who had been ignored needed the front row. General Morrison opened the session by acknowledging that each complaint had been closed without reviewing the access logs that could have confirmed the truth. The institution failed before Sergeant Caldwell did, he said. His choices were individual. Our refusal to examine them became systemic. Caldwell sat at a separate table with counsel and his supervising captain. He no longer wore a gate radio or access badge. When the retired nurse spoke, she did not raise her voice. She described arriving for a reunion honoring the medical unit she had served with for 28 years. Her card had cleared, yet she was told to wait until another guest could confirm she belonged there. I spent my career caring for soldiers who never asked me to prove I was worthy before I treated them, she said. At that gate, my own service became less believable than one man's suspicion. Caldwell lowered his eyes. The contractor explained that his white supervisor had been admitted using the same credentials format minutes earlier. The veteran described missing his daughter's opening remarks because the officer reviewing his card kept asking who had invited him. The mother said the worst part was not the delay. It was watching her son search the audience for her while she stood outside a building that already had her name on the list. Angela listened as each account gave shape to a pattern that had once been hidden inside administrative language. Sophie held Michael's folded letter in her lap. The line on the back of his photograph had become more than a family memory. It had become a standard the system had failed to meet. When it was Caldwell's turn to speak, he stood slowly. I wrote reports that made my judgment sound objective, he said. It was not. I treated verified black visitors as suspicious because they did not fit the image I expected. Then I used procedure to protect the decision. He looked toward the 5 complainants. I am sorry. I will not ask any of you to accept that today. The nurse studied him for a long moment. An apology is not access, she said. What changes after this? General Morrison answered by presenting the new policy. Any rejection of verified credentials would require immediate review by a second supervisor. Every override would be stored automatically. Junior officers could report concerns through a protected channel. Quarterly audits would examine whether delays fell disproportionately on any racial group. Complaints could no longer be closed without reviewing digital records and body camera footage. Officer Cooper stood near the wall as the policy was read. He had helped draft the protected reporting section using his own failure as the example. When the meeting ended, the 5 complainants received corrected incident records and written acknowledgments that their credentials had been valid. Caldwell's disciplinary board had recommended permanent removal from access control duties and termination from installation police service. The final decision would be issued within weeks. Outside, Sophie and Angela walked toward the east gate as afternoon light stretched across the pavement. Does this fix what happened? Sophie asked. Angela looked back at the conference center. No policy can return a missed ceremony or erase humiliation. Then what does it do? It makes silence harder and truth easier to preserve. At the gate, Cooper was training a new officer. A black veteran in work clothes approached with an old identification card. The new officer hesitated when the photograph looked different, but Cooper did not let uncertainty become judgment. Use secondary verification, he said. Ask the system before you ask your assumptions. The card cleared. The barrier lifted. The veteran walked through without knowing who Angela was or why she had stopped to watch. Sophie smiled faintly. He changed. Angela kept her eyes on Cooper. He made one better choice. She placed Michael's letter back inside her coat. Change is what happens when that choice becomes a habit. 6 months later, the East Gate no longer felt like the place where Angela had once been asked to prove what the system already knew. The same glass booth stood beneath the morning sky, and the same barrier crossed the entrance, but every decision now left a visible record. Officer Cooper served as acting supervisor, and a second reviewer signed each denied entry before anyone was turned away. Angela arrived in a rented sedan with Sophie beside her, just as she had on the morning of the memorial. She wore the same charcoal suit and pale gold blouse. This time, the brown leather case rested closed on the back seat, no longer carrying sealed citations, only Michael's photograph and the letter Sophie had chosen to preserve. Cooper approached the driver's window. He recognized Angela immediately, but he did not wave her through because of her rank. He greeted both women, scanned the identification card, waited for the green authorization, and returned it with both hands. "Welcome back, General Whitfield." Angela studied him for a moment. "Thank you for verifying." He understood the difference. Respect was not ignoring procedure for someone important. It was applying procedure honestly to everyone. As the barrier began to rise, an older black woman in a faded veteran's cap stepped toward the pedestrian entrance carrying a canvas bag and a folder of medical records. The new officer at the desk compared her present face with the younger photograph on her card and hesitated. Angela watched Cooper move beside him. "Do not decide from the picture alone," he said. "Run secondary verification." The officer followed the process. The screen turned green. Retired Army nurse. 28 years of service. Authorized visitor. Cooper returned the card and opened the gate. "Thank you for your service, ma'am." The woman smiled with quiet relief and walked inside without ever learning that a major general had been watching from the nearby car. Sophie followed her with her eyes. "That was the point, was it not?" she asked. Angela nodded. No one should need witnesses with stars on their shoulders before the truth is believed. They drove toward the conference center, where the 12 families had gathered for the first annual review of the memorial access reforms. General Morrison announced that the 5 earlier complainants had received amended records, formal apologies, and compensation for documented losses caused by the wrongful delays. Caldwell had been dismissed from installation police service after the disciplinary board confirmed repeated discriminatory screening and false reporting. He had also written directly to each complainant without asking for forgiveness or blaming the system he had used. Angela did not call that redemption. Accountability could open a door, but only future choices could show whether someone had walked through it. During the meeting, Sophie read a short passage from her father's letter. "Rank is temporary. The way we treat people remains." Her voice was steady. Angela sat in the front row, listening as her daughter transformed a private sentence into a public standard. Afterward, Cooper approached them near the entrance. "The audits show the racial gap in secondary screening has dropped sharply," he said. "We still have work to do." Angela looked toward the gate. "Good systems admit that." Cooper nodded. "I used to think courage meant confronting someone once. Now I think it means making the right decision every day after the attention is gone." Sophie smiled. "That sounds like something my father would have said." They returned to the sedan as afternoon light settled across the pavement. In the rearview mirror, Angela saw another visitor approach the checkpoint in ordinary clothes. The officer scanned the card, asked one clear question, and opened the gate without suspicion or performance. The barrier lifted slowly, creating a clean line against the sky. Sophie placed Michael's photograph on the dashboard. Angela started the car and drove forward. The 4 generals who had saluted her were gone. The cameras were gone. The crowd was gone. What remained was one person being treated fairly when no powerful audience was present. That was the true measure of change. And one question remained for everyone who heard what happened: when the truth challenges the image you expected to see, will you protect your assumption, or will you have the courage to let the truth through?